I should have just stayed the night. That's the first thing that crossed my mind when I realized how alone I was. But I had walked home from Jason's place 100 times before. It was only a 15-minute walk, 20 at most if I took my time. No big deal. Right? Tonight, though, something felt off. The streets were empty, which wasn't unusual for this late, but the silence was different. Not the usual quiet hum of a sleeping neighborhood. No distant cars, no dogs barking, no wind rustling the trees. Just silence, thick and unnatural, pressing against me like an invisible weight. I shoved my hands into my pockets and picked up my pace, my footsteps echoing too loudly against the pavement. The mist had rolled in heavier than I expected, curling around the streetlights, swallowing the houses into shadowy outlines. The whole world felt smaller, closed in. I told myself I was just being paranoid. Then I heard it. A second set of footsteps. I stopped dead in my tracks. So did they. My heart pounded. I swallowed hard and turned around, expecting, hoping to see someone else just walking home. Just another late-night pedestrian. But there was no one there. The street behind me stretched empty and silent, the fog twisting in lazy tendrils across the pavement. I let out a shaky breath and forced a laugh. My mind was playing tricks on me. Maybe it was just the sound of my own footsteps echoing weirdly off the houses. I turned back and kept walking. A few steps later, I heard it again. Footsteps. Close. Too close. I spun around so fast, I nearly tripped over myself. Still nothing. But this time, the silence felt wrong. Heavier. Like the air itself was holding its breath. I stared into the mist, my pulse hammering against my ribs. My gut screamed at me to run, but I didn't want to look like a paranoid idiot. So I did the next best thing. I pulled out my phone, pretending to check my messages while using the screen's reflection to glance behind me. At first, there was nothing. Then, out of the fog, a shape moved. My stomach dropped. It was tall. Too tall. A warped, elongated silhouette just standing there, motionless at the edge of the mist. I couldn't make out any features, just a stretched-out figure, like a person whose proportions were all wrong. I gripped my phone tighter, my breath coming fast. This wasn't right. This wasn't human. I turned around and started walking faster, my legs stiff, my body screaming at me to run. But I didn't want to. Running felt like it would trigger something. Like if I acknowledged how wrong this was, it would do something. The footsteps followed. I could hear them now, heavy and deliberate, like someone stepping in time with me on purpose. I reached the next streetlight and risked another glance back. It was closer, still standing, still watching, but now I could see more of it. Its limbs were too long, its body slightly bent at unnatural angles. And its face, it didn't have a face. Just a smooth, empty expanse where features should be. I couldn't take it anymore. I ran. I sprinted down the sidewalk, my breath ragged, my heart slamming against my ribs. I didn't care how crazy I looked. I didn't care about anything except getting away. But the footsteps didn't stop. They sped up. They were running too. I didn't dare look back. I just focused on the distant glow of my house, barely visible through the thickening fog. My lungs burned, my legs ached, but I pushed harder, faster. The sound of its footsteps was right behind me. Then, a whisper, right at my ear, not words, just a sound. A rasping, wet breath that sent ice through my veins. I nearly tripped as I scrambled up my driveway, fumbling with my keys, slamming into my front door. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped them. Behind me, the footsteps stopped. I bent down, grabbed my keys, and forced myself not to turn around. Every nerve in my body screamed that if I looked now, I would see something I couldn't unsee. I shoved the key into the lock, twisted it, and threw myself inside. The moment the door slammed shut, the silence returned. I stood there, chest heaving, my body drenched in sweat. Slowly, I reached up and locked every single deadbolt. Then, after a long moment, I did what I swore I wouldn't do. I looked through the peephole. The street was empty. No footsteps, no figure, just fog. But as I stood there trying to convince myself I had imagined it, something moved in the corner of my vision, a shadow. standing just outside the glow of the street lamp. And then it took a step closer. I don't walk home alone anymore. I should have taken a cab. I should have taken a damn cab. The bus had dropped me off a few blocks away from my apartment, same as always. It was late. Too late. The street was empty, the air thick and humid, pressing against my skin like damp fabric. The only sounds were my own footsteps, echoing too loud against the cracked pavement. I hated walking past the old gas station. It had been abandoned for years, its once bright red and white paint now faded and peeling. The windows were boarded up, but something about the place always felt off. The sickly green glow of the half-broken neon "Open 24 Hours" sign still buzzed weakly in the night, though no one had been inside for years. But tonight, something was different. The door. It was open. Not much, just a crack. But that was enough. Enough for something to have gone inside, or worse, for something to have come out. I walked faster. Then I heard it. Scrape. A slow, deliberate dragging sound. Metal against concrete. I swallowed hard, telling myself it was just my imagination. Just the wind rattling some loose debris inside. Scrape, louder, closer. I kept my eyes forward, my pulse hammering in my ears. I was almost past the station, almost safe. But then a sound too close stopped me in my tracks. A breath, right behind me. Cold and wet like something exhaling thick, rancid air onto the back of my neck. I turned around, and I saw it. A figure stood in the doorway of the gas station. Tall. Too tall. Its limbs were wrong, stretched thin like something had pulled it apart and stitched it back together wrong. Its skin was pale and waxy, stretched so tight over its bones that it looked ready to split. But the worst part was its face. Its mouth was too wide, lips cracked and pulled back into something that wasn't quite a smile. Its teeth were jagged, uneven, stained with something dark. And its eyes, it didn't have any. Just two empty black holes where they should have been. Gaping voids that seemed to swallow the weak glow of the neon light. Then it moved. I ran. I didn't think. I didn't hesitate. My legs just moved. I heard it behind me, its footsteps wet and uneven, slapping against the pavement. But it wasn't just the sound of its feet. It was something else. A horrible, wet, squelching noise like raw meat hitting the ground. Then came the laughter, a garbled, choking sound thick with something wet. It wasn't human. I sprinted down the street, my lungs burning, my vision blurring with panic. The houses were dark. No one was awake. No one was coming to help me. I dared one glance over my shoulder, and it was closer. Its jaw had unhinged, splitting impossibly wide. A long, black tongue wriggled inside, curling and snapping like it was tasting the air. I pushed myself harder, my muscles screaming. I could see my apartment at the end of the street, just a little farther. Then, something cold wrapped around my ankle. I crashed onto the pavement, pain jolting through my elbows and knees as I skidded forward. My skin burned, my breath knocked from my lungs. Before I could even react, it was on top of me. The smell hit me first, rotting meat, old gasoline, something foul and rancid. Its breath was hot and damp against my ear. I thrashed, kicking, clawing at the pavement, but it was strong, inhumanly strong. Its hands weren't hands at all, just long, bony fingers tipped with jagged, cracked nails. I felt them dig into my shoulders, pinning me down. Then it spoke. Not a voice, not really. Just a thick, wet, gurgling noise, like something trying to form words through a throat full of blood. Mine. I tried to scream, but it bit me first. Its teeth sank into my shoulder, tearing through muscle, crunching into bone. A hot explosion of pain shot through my body, and I could feel the warmth of my own blood gushing down my chest. I screamed, thrashing beneath it, but it only dug its claws in deeper, its tongue slithering out to lap at the wound. I tried to fight. I really did, but I was getting so cold. My strength was fading. My vision blurred, my heartbeat sluggish. The last thing I saw was its eyes, endless, gaping black holes, and the last thing I heard was its laughter. Then, nothing. I never should have walked home alone that night. It wasn't far, just a few blocks, but something felt wrong. The air was thick, stale, pressing against my skin like damp cloth. The streetlights flickered erratically, casting long, twitching shadows. The world was too quiet. No distant cars, no wind, no hum of street signs, nothing. Just me and something else. I first noticed it when I turned onto my street, a shadow, not moving, just standing. It was at the far end of the sidewalk, under a flickering street lamp. Tall, too tall. The proportions were off, its arms dangled past its knees, its neck too long and thin. I stopped walking. It didn't move. At first I thought it was just a trick of the light. Maybe a tree casting a weird shadow. Maybe my tired, slightly tipsy brain was making me paranoid. Then it stepped forward. My stomach twisted. I walked faster, my pulse hammering in my ears. Just a few more houses, another step, and another. I didn't look back. Don't look. Just keep walking. My apartment building was just ahead. I could make it. Then I heard it, a whisper, right behind me. I froze. It wasn't in English. It wasn't in any language. Just a horrible, garbled sound, thick and wet, like something choking on blood. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. My breath came in short, shallow gasps. My legs trembled. I knew, deep in my gut, that if I turned around, if I saw it too clearly, it would be real. It would take me. I forced myself to move. Each step felt like walking through water, my limbs sluggish, heavy. The whispering didn't stop. It slithered into my ears, worming into my brain. I could hear it inside me. Then the air changed. The temperature dropped suddenly, violently. My breath came out in a white mist. My fingers numbed, and the whispering stopped. I could feel it now. Not behind me, above me. I clenched my eyes shut. Don't look. I could hear it breathing, wet, ragged, too close. I reached my apartment steps. My hands fumbled for my keys, shaking so violently they almost slipped from my grasp. And then, a hand brushed the back of my neck, cold, clammy, fingers too long. A breath hot and damp against my ear. Mine. A voice, not human, not real, I screamed. The keys nearly slipped from my grasp, but I managed to shove one into the lock and twist. The door flew open and I threw myself inside, slamming it shut behind me. Silence. The air inside was warm, normal, safe. I pressed my back against the door, my heart slamming against my ribs, my breath coming in short, sharp gasps. For a long moment, I didn't move, didn't breathe. And then, tap, 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 a slow, deliberate knocking on the other side of the door. I covered my mouth to keep from screaming. The tapping grew louder. Fingernails, dragging down the wood. My phone vibrated in my pocket. I jumped, my stomach lurching. I pulled it out with trembling hands. A message. Unknown number. One word. Look. And beneath it, a photo. I almost didn't want to open it, but my thumb moved on its own, tapping the image. My stomach dropped. It was a picture of me, standing outside my apartment door, from behind. And something loomed in the shadows just inches from me. A figure too tall, with arms stretching impossibly long. Its head was tilted, and though its face was obscured, I could feel it, watching me. My breath hitched. The timestamp on the photo was from 1 minute ago. I slowly turned my head toward the peephole. A single elongated finger reached under my door, pale, boneless, sliding across the floor like a worm, feeling blindly for me. I choked on a sob, stumbling backward. My phone vibrated again. Another message. You shouldn't have looked. Then, the door handle turned, slowly, deliberately. I backed away, my pulse hammering. The lights in my apartment flickered. The air grew cold. And the last thing I heard before the door creaked open was the voice. A horrible, wet whisper. Mine. I should have stayed at the party. I should have stayed where there were people. But I was tired, a little drunk, and the thought of calling an Uber felt like too much effort. My apartment wasn't far, 20 minutes at most. The streets were quiet, empty, and I'd walked them 1,000 times before. No big deal, or at least that's what I told myself. The night air was thick and humid, clinging to my skin like damp fabric. The streetlights hummed faintly, their flickering glow barely cutting through the darkness. My footsteps echoed too loudly against the pavement, the sound bouncing between the rows of darkened houses. I wasn't scared. Not yet. But then I noticed something. The silence. No wind, no distant hum of traffic, no chirping crickets, nothing. The world felt dead. That's when I heard it. Footsteps. Not mine. Soft. Light. A few paces behind me. I stopped walking. So did they. A chill rolled down my spine. I swallowed hard and turned my head slowly. Nothing. The street was empty. The sidewalk behind me stretched on, undisturbed. I let out a nervous chuckle. Just my imagination. I had too much to drink. My mind was playing tricks on me. I kept walking. Then the footsteps started again, faster this time, closer. I spun around. Still nothing. The streetlights buzzed overhead. The houses stood quiet, their windows dark. No one was there, and yet I felt it. A presence, something watching, something waiting. I picked up my pace. The footsteps matched mine. I walked faster. They walked faster. My pulse pounded in my ears. I was being followed. But by what? I didn't want to know. I broke into a run. So did they. The sound was impossibly close now, right at my heels. But no matter how fast I ran, I never saw anything behind me, just emptiness. I could see my apartment building up ahead, just a little farther, just a few more steps. Then, cold breath on my neck, hot, wet, rotten. My stomach twisted. I reached my front door, fumbling for my keys with shaking hands. The footsteps stopped. The silence pressed in, thick and suffocating. Don't look back. I shoved the key into the lock, my fingers trembling. Don't look back. I turned the knob. Don't look back. And then from behind me, a whisper. Low, garbled, not human. You see me? My entire body went rigid. No, 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 no. I wasn't looking. I hadn't turned around, but I could feel it, right behind me. I squeezed my eyes shut, forcing my body through the door, slamming it behind me. Safe. I was safe. I pressed my forehead against the cool wood, my chest rising and falling in sharp, shallow breaths. No footsteps, no whispers, just silence. I let out a shaky laugh. I was losing my mind. With a deep breath, I turned away from the door and stepped into my apartment. And that's when I heard it. A single soft tap. 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 My stomach turned to ice. It was coming from the other side of the door. Tap, 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 slow, methodical, waiting. I backed away. It couldn't be real. I didn't see anything. I hadn't looked. I hadn't. Knock, 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 louder now, insistent. I covered my ears. Go away. Then, a voice, distorted, twisted. Wrong. You looked. My breath hitched in my throat. I didn't. I swear, I didn't. A scraping sound, like nails against wood. Long nails, too long. It dragged down the door, slow and deliberate. My body refused to move. Then, knock, knock, knock. My phone vibrated in my pocket. I jumped, my heart slamming against my ribs. I pulled it out with shaking hands. A message. Unknown. Number. One word. Look. A photo attachment loaded beneath the text. My blood ran cold. It was a picture of me, standing outside my apartment door, from behind. Something loomed in the shadows just inches from me. A shape, a presence, a mouth. Grinning. The photo was time-stamped. 2 minutes ago. My hands shook. My entire body trembled. Then, knock, knock, knock. The air in the room shifted. The temperature plummeted. I wasn't alone. A new message flashed on my screen. You shouldn't have looked. The light above me flickered. My breath came in short, shallow gasps, and then the door handle turned, slowly, deliberately. And the last thing I heard before everything went dark was the door creaking open,